When I attended my wife's sister's wedding, my name tag said Freeloader. Her cousin laughed. Is that what you do best? I was told to sit near the trash bin, behind the caterers. Don't embarrass us by eating with the guests, my wife whispered. I smiled, looked at her father, and said, then I guess I'm not family. 5 minutes later, my FIL quietly took off his tie. I was humiliated at my sister-in-law's wedding when my wife let her family label me as a freeloader. So I left the reception, and now I'm reconsidering my entire marriage. Don't embarrass us by eating with the guests, Celia whispered, her eyes darting across the courtyard. I looked down at the name tag I just picked up. One word, printed in bold, freeloader. I let out a soft laugh, more disbelief than humor. Her cousin, Becca, passed behind me and smirked. Is that what you do best? I looked back at my wife. Then I looked at her father. And I said, then I guess I'm not family. 5 minutes later, Richard Branson, her father, took off his tie and walked toward me, quietly, steadily, like a man making a choice. This story's been sitting on my chest for a while. A few weeks ago, I went to my wife's younger sister's wedding and got treated like absolute garbage. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't accidental. It was very clearly orchestrated. And the person who allowed it to happen, possibly even coordinated it, was my own wife, Celia. I'm not looking for sympathy. I just want to understand if I'm right to feel like I've reached the end of my rope. Because I'm trying to make sense of a marriage that, for a long time, I thought was solid, even if a little lopsided. I'm 43 male. Celia's 38. We've been married for 6 years. No kids. We live in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm a freelance accountant now. Used to have a decent job in corporate finance, but during the playoffs last year, I was let go. The transition to freelance hasn't been easy, and even though I'm pulling in work, enough to cover my half of the bills and more, it hasn't been consistent enough for Celia's family to see it as real. Her family is old money. They throw huge parties, take vacations to the Hamptons, donate to art museums with their names on the plaques. They live in a different reality. I don't come from that world. I was raised in Akron. My dad worked at a tool and die shop. My mom was a school secretary. I worked through college and graduated with debt. I'm not ashamed of it. I've lived a life I'm proud of. I've always worked hard, and even when things haven't gone well, I never gave up. But from the beginning, Celia's family saw me as some kind of temporary project. I was tolerated, not accepted. Invited, but never included. I remember early dinners at her parents' home in Shaker Heights. Everyone dressed to the nines, sipping wine that cost more than my monthly car insurance. I tried to make conversation. I asked about their lives. I helped clear dishes. I never got more than polite nods and vague smiles. Still, I figured they'd come around. People soften over time, right? I was wrong. Harper, Celia's younger sister, was getting married in Phoenix. The whole family was flying out, and they went all out. The venue was the Wrigley Mansion. If you've ever been, you know it's this massive, historic estate with manicured gardens and views over the city. The type of place that makes people think they're royalty. Celia was at the wedding party, of course. I was just the spouse. From the moment we got to Arizona, I could feel the distance. The family was staying at this boutique resort, and they'd booked out an entire wing. But I was assigned a different room, not even on the same floor. When I asked Celia about it, she said it was a mix-up and not to worry about it. At the rehearsal dinner, I wasn't seated at the main tables. I was stuck at a side table with the kids of vendors and the assistant wedding planner's fiancé. Celia sat with her family and the rest of the bridal party. I told myself not to read into it. Maybe they just overbooked. Maybe they just assumed I'd prefer quiet. Then the wedding day came. The reception was held in a gorgeous courtyard with linen-covered tables and hanging lights. A live quartet was playing something soft and classical. As guests arrived, they picked up their name tags from a long table decorated with flowers. I approached, scanning the cards, and there it was. Instead of my name, Marshall Wright, the card simply said, Freeloader. Plain. White. Thick cardstock. Same fancy calligraphy as the others. I just stared at it. I looked around, trying to see if anyone else had noticed. People were chatting, sipping drinks, and laughing. I thought maybe it was a mistake. A cruel coincidence. Then I saw Becca, Celia's cousin. She walked past me, saw my tag, laughed like it was the best joke she'd heard in years. Is that what you do best? I didn't answer. I picked up the tag and tucked it into my pocket. Then Celia appeared, her makeup perfect, her hair pinned back, bouquet in hand. She didn't even greet me, just looked at me and said quietly, don't embarrass us by eating with the guests. There's a spot for you near the back, behind the tent. I told them to set up a plate. I stared at her. She said, it's not a big deal. Just, please don't make this about you. That was it. I looked at her, then looked across the courtyard. Her father, Richard, was standing near the edge of the dance floor, drink in hand. He was watching the whole thing. Watching me. And I said, loud enough for him to hear, then I guess I'm not family. And I walked away. Behind the tent, there was a folding table near the trash bins. I kid you not. A single plate of food had been set out. No silverware. A plastic cup. A napkin someone had written Marshall on in Sharpie. No one said a word to me as I sat down. The fan was buzzing. It was 90-something degrees. My jacket was sticking to my back. I sat there in silence, eating food off a paper plate at one of the most extravagant weddings I'd ever seen. 5 minutes later, someone sat down next to me. It was Richard. He didn't say anything at first, just loosened his tie, took it off, and set it on the table. Then he said, "I told them this was wrong. I told Celia." I didn't respond. He sipped his drink. "You've always been decent to us. Better than most of them deserve." Still, I said nothing. He stood up, looked at me, and said, "Come inside. You're at my table." And just like that, the dynamic shifted. When I walked in behind Richard, the air changed. Guests looked confused. Celia turned white. Becca stopped talking mid-sentence. He pulled out a chair next to his and motioned for me to sit. I did. No one spoke for a while. The rest of the evening passed in a surreal haze. I didn't speak much, just sat at that long polished table with Richard beside me and a few guests who clearly weren't sure what was going on. Their laughter was nervous, their eyes flicking between Richard and me like they were waiting for someone to start yelling. But no one did. Celia didn't come over, not at first. She kept herself occupied with photos and speeches and keeping Harper's veil fluffed just right. I could tell she didn't know how to react. She looked over a few times, jaw tight, eyes unreadable. But she didn't approach. Richard? He made small talk with me. Asked about a landscaping issue he was having back at his lake house in Sandusky. Talked about the Browns' quarterback situation like nothing had happened. It wasn't until after the cake had been cut, after the first dance, after the sun had dipped below the Phoenix skyline, that Celia finally came over. She didn't say a word at first, just stood behind me while I finished my drink. When I turned to look at her, she gave me that familiar look, the one that wasn't quite anger, but more like disappointment she hadn't expected to feel. "I asked you not to make this a thing," she said. "Didn't have to." I replied, quiet and even. "You already made one." She looked around, like she didn't want anyone to hear us, then leaned in. "You humiliated me." I almost laughed. "You sat me near the trash bins. You weren't supposed to." Richard wasn't supposed to what? Treat me like a human being? She swallowed hard. Her eyes shimmered a little, not quite tears, but the kind of wetness that builds when someone knows they've lost control of a situation. "You always take everything so personally," she said, and I could hear the cracks in her voice. And in that moment, something in me broke. Not loudly, not dramatically. It just quietly split open like a seam that had been tugged too many times. This wasn't about a wedding, or a name tag, or even a family snobbery. It was about the erosion of dignity. The slow, quiet way someone chips away at your worth until you start thinking maybe you deserve it. But I knew I didn't. I looked at her and said, "You've been embarrassed by me for a long time. You just finally found the perfect place to show it." She blinked, looked away. "I don't want to do this right now," she said. "Neither do I said. "But I think I have to." I stood and walked away, not storming off, not causing a scene. I just needed space. I went back behind the tent. The fan was still humming. The night air had cooled a bit. A few servers were laughing quietly while packing up plates. No one paid me any mind. And for the first time in a long time, I felt still. We flew back to Cleveland 2 days later. Barely spoke the whole flight. Celia kept herself buried in a bridal magazine she'd picked up at the airport. I looked out the window. At baggage claim, she turned to me and said, "We should probably talk tonight." I nodded. But we didn't. Not that night. Not the next. The silence in our house became a third presence, hovering between us, unspoken and heavy. She tiptoed around me. I answered her in short phrases. We both pretended to sleep. I kept replaying everything. Not just the wedding, but the months before. The way she'd stopped asking about my work. How she winced when I wore my worn-out boots around her friends. The way she'd once introduced me to someone as between jobs, even though I'd been freelancing for nearly a year. The wedding had just been the boiling point. The moment all the quiet slights and backhanded comments finally caught fire. 3 days after we got back, Richard called. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "Fine," I said. "No, you're not. But that's okay. Listen, I wanted you to know. I wasn't proud of what my daughter did. I raised her better than that. I think somewhere along the way, she started seeing people as resumes, not as people." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. She asked me if she should apologize. I told her not unless she meant it. That stung, in a strange way. The idea that she might apologize not because she cared, but because it was expected. "Thanks," I said. "I meant what I said at the wedding. You've shown up more for this family than most of my actual kids." I didn't cry, but I could feel something loose in my chest. Celia and I started couples counseling 2 weeks later. She booked it. She said she wanted to try. I agreed, cautiously. Not because I thought it would fix everything, but because I needed to know, really know, if this was something that had broken beyond repair, or just something that had been neglected too long. The first session was awkward. She cried a little. I didn't. She said things like, "I didn't mean it that way," and "I just wanted everything to look perfect." The therapist asked her what perfect looked like. She didn't have an answer. I told the therapist how I felt, small, dismissed, invisible. Celia looked shocked. I never meant to make you feel like that. But good intentions don't erase bad outcomes. We've had 4 sessions now. Some progress. Some tension. Sometimes I wonder if we're just trying to patch a boat that's already taken on too much water. Other times, I think maybe, we're just learning how to row in the same direction again. I don't know. We kept going to therapy. Week by week, session by session, we pulled apart threads of our relationship that had been tangled for years. Something surprised me. Others felt like confirmation of what I already knew. Celia said she felt like she was carrying us. That after I lost my corporate job, something in her snapped. Not because she thought I wasn't trying, but because she was scared. Scared we'd slide down. Scared we'd lose our status. I never wanted to look like we were struggling, she admitted during one session. I said, we were struggling, but I was still here. Still trying. She looked down. Said nothing. I realized then that somewhere along the way, she'd started seeing me less as her partner and more as a reflection of her own standing in the world. And when that reflection stopped looking polished, she turned away from it. She said, I thought if I kept it together, if I kept us looking successful, it would be okay. I didn't know I was making you feel like an outsider. I told her, the wedding wasn't just a mistake. It was something that had been building. You didn't speak up when it counted. She didn't argue. The therapist asked us both, do you want to repair this, or are you hoping it just fades back into comfort? That question hung in the air for a while. Celia said she wanted to fix it, that she wanted to be better. I said I didn't know yet. I wasn't trying to punish her. I just couldn't say yes without meaning it. At home, things were civil. Too civil. We moved like roommates more than a married couple. Shared meals in silence. She started asking more questions. How was your client meeting? Did that invoice clear? And I tried to answer. But the warmth wasn't there yet. One night, she came home late from a work dinner. She stood in the doorway of our bedroom and said, I've been thinking about what you said. About how I didn't speak up. I looked up from the book I was pretending to read. I did that a lot, didn't I? She said. Let them talk over you. Let them act like you were just tagging along. I didn't answer. She sat down at the foot of the bed. I guess I thought you were strong enough to take it, she said. I told her. But being able to take it doesn't mean I should have had to. She nodded slowly, like something was finally registering on a deeper level. I told my mother I wouldn't be attending her next gala, she said. Unless you're invited. And unless your name's on the place card the way it should be. That surprised me. Her mother ran those events like royal court functions. Inviting someone outside their social sphere would be like letting the wrong brand of wine show up on the table. She wasn't happy, Celia added, almost with a smirk. I didn't know what to say. She looked at me. I'm trying. I nodded. I know. It was honest. She was trying. But the damage was still there, like a foundation with a long crack running through it. You can patch it, sure, but the next storm might widen it again. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Becca. Yeah, that Becca, the cousin who made the "is that what you do best" joke. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Hey, Marshall, she said. This is awkward, but I wanted to apologize. I stayed quiet. I didn't realize how messed up that whole thing was until after, she said. Your tag, the table, all of it. I just went along with it because that's what we do in this family. There was a long pause. But it wasn't right, she added. And I shouldn't have laughed. It didn't change anything, but hearing it felt strange. Like a ripple in a still pond. Thanks for saying that, I told her. Later, I told Celia about the call. She didn't say much, just nodded and said, good. She was uncomfortable. I could tell. Were you the one who had the tag made? I asked. No, she said quickly. But I saw it before you did. And I didn't stop. That admission hit harder than anything else. You had a chance, I said. You knew? I know, she whispered. And I'm sorry. It wasn't defensive. It wasn't some PR move. It felt honest. And that honesty scared me more than any lie could have, because it meant she'd known the whole time and just froze. We went to dinner the following weekend. Not a fancy place, just a quiet Italian place near downtown we used to go to when we were still dating. The staff remembered us. Halfway through the meal, she said, I've been talking to my therapist. You're seeing someone on your own? I asked. She nodded. Figured I couldn't rely on just couples therapy to sort through my part. I wasn't expecting that. I realized I've spent most of my life managing optics, she said. Not relationships. Not emotions. Just appearances. That tracked. And with you, I think I got scared because you didn't care about that stuff. You cared about showing up, doing the right thing. And I didn't know how to value that. She picked at her food. But I'm trying to learn. That dinner didn't fix everything. But it added a few bricks back to the bridge that had crumbled between us. We walked home that night, slowly. No touching, no hand-holding. Just side by side. Like two people deciding if they still belonged in the same story. Back home, I sat on the edge of the bed. She changed into her pajamas, then came over and sat down next to me. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said. But I hope you will. I stared at the floor. I'm not sure forgiveness is what I'm after, I said. I want to know if respect is still possible. She exhaled, soft and tired. Then I'll earn that back. No promises. No grand gestures. Just that. And somehow, that felt more sincere than anything she'd said in months. Celia was different after that. Not in dramatic, sweeping ways, but in those quiet, granular shifts that only someone living alongside her every day would notice. She started paying attention to how she spoke to me, how she spoke about me when others were around. I didn't hear "he's between things" anymore. I heard "Marshall's working with a few clients on tax strategy," or "he's picking up a few contracts. Seems like he's in demand again." Small things, but they landed. Still, there was a fog between us. That kind of post-fight quiet that doesn't erupt but settles, thick and low, like you're waiting for something to finally clear. We went through the motions. Work, sleep, dinners, appointments. But beneath it all, we were slowly, cautiously, approaching something. Some truth we'd both spent years ignoring. We were at a crossroads. One night, about a month after the wedding, I came across the name tag again. I hadn't thrown it out. It was still in the breast pocket of the jacket I'd worn that day. I was getting dressed for a client meeting, and when I reached in, there it was. Stiff. Heavy. So much weight in a single piece of cardstock. I held it for a long time. I didn't feel rage, not anymore. Just the kind of low, sad acceptance. That this thing, this word, had been used to define me in front of 150 people. And not one person, not even the woman I married, had stopped it in time. I left the tag on the kitchen counter and went to work. When I got home later that evening, it was gone. I found it in the trash, ripped cleanly in half. Celia was in the living room, sipping tea, her laptop open on her knees. She glanced up when I came in. "I saw it," she said. "I figured." She looked down, then back at me. "I don't know why I didn't throw it out that night." I shrugged. "Maybe you weren't ready." "Maybe." I sat down across from her. "I've been trying to figure out," I said slowly, "why it hurt as much as it did." She waited. "And I think it's because I never expected them to like me. But I did expect you to defend me." That landed. She closed the laptop and set it aside. "I failed you," she said. Simple. Direct. Honest. I nodded. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like we were on the same page. A few days later, an email came in. It was from Harper, her sister. Subject line: "Apology, I hope you'll read." I hovered over the delete button but decided to open it. It was long, rambling in parts, but genuine. She wrote, "I don't know how that name tag ever made it onto the table. I swear I didn't approve of it. But I didn't stop, either. I didn't want to rock the boat or question anything that day because I was so caught up in everything else. I know that's not an excuse. I'm sorry I made my wedding a place where someone felt dehumanized, especially someone who's been part of our lives for years." I appreciated the message. I didn't reply right away. I showed it to Celia, and she read it in silence, biting her lip. "She means it," she said. "Maybe." We left it at that. Then came the invitation. An embossed card arrived from her parents' address. It was for the annual Branson Foundation Gala. I hadn't been invited in 2 years, not that I missed it. Rows of overly polished people pretending they cared about urban literacy programs while sipping French wine flown in by the case. But this time, the envelope had both our names on it. Inside, there was a handwritten note on heavy stationery from her mother. "We hope to see you, Marshall. We'd like to speak with you properly." I showed it to Celia. She said nothing for a while. Then, "You don't have to go. I didn't ask them to invite you. You think I should?" "I think it's your call." I didn't answer right away. Later that night, she came into the bedroom and sat beside me. "I'm not trying to fix everything with one invitation," she said. "But maybe it's a start." I nodded. "That's what I'm afraid of." She frowned. "Afraid? That they'll do the dance. Play nice for one night. And then it'll go right back to what it was." Her face fell, not in a dramatic way, but like someone slowly exhaling after holding in too much hope. "Then don't go," she said. But I didn't say no. That weekend, I drove to meet Richard for lunch. He suggested a pub-style spot halfway between Cleveland and Sandusky, said he needed to get out of the city for a bit. We met at a booth in the corner, both of us ordering burgers and iced tea. "You get the invite?" he asked, folding his menu. I nodded. I did. He leaned back, arms crossed. "I know they've got a lot to make up for." I didn't say anything. "You've got every right to tell them to go to hell. I wouldn't blame you." "I'm not looking for revenge," I said. "I just want to stop feeling like I'm tolerating my own marriage." He raised a brow at that. "Celia's trying," I added. "She really is. But I think she's trying to fix a version of the relationship that never really worked to begin with." Richard sat quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. "That's a hell of a thing to realize, isn't it?" "It is." He looked down at his drink. "You know, I stayed married to her mother for 27 years before we finally admitted we didn't actually like each other. That surprised me. She was polished, connected. Everyone loved her. But we weren't partners. We made appearances. That hit harder than I expected." "I see pieces of that in you too," he said. "But I also see something we never had. Honesty. You just have to decide if that honesty is enough to build from, or if it's just what's left after everything else is gone." We ate the rest of our lunch mostly in silence. When we got up to leave, he clapped me on the shoulder. Whatever you decide, make sure it's for you, not for the optics. I still hadn't decided about the gala. It was a week away. The invitation sat unopened on the kitchen counter. Celia didn't bring it up again, but I saw the changes in her. She was showing up, not just in public, but in small moments at home. She started making dinner a few nights a week again, asked questions, laughed when I made dumb jokes, watched baseball with me instead of going to the other room. Not because she had to, just because. And that felt like more progress than anything else. The night of the gala arrived, and the envelope still sat unopened on the kitchen counter. Celia didn't pressure me, didn't even mention it. She just moved around me quietly, respectfully, like someone afraid to stir a surface that was finally calm after months of storms. But it wasn't fear in her, not anymore. It was a caution. She was learning, slowly, what it meant to respect someone's dignity, not just their silence. That morning, she got her dress steamed and her shoes polished. I watched her fuss with her hair in the mirror, doing that thing where she twisted a curl, just so, and tilted her head to see it from every angle. She caught my eyes in the reflection. I'm going either way, she said. But I hope you'll come. I nodded, still noncommittal. Around 4 p.m., I went into the hall closet and pulled out a navy suit I hadn't worn in over a year. Sharp lines, subtle sheen, tailored back when things felt simpler. I laid it across the bed and stared at it for a long time. At 6:30 p.m., I put it on. Celia turned when I stepped into the hallway, her earrings half done. You're coming, she said, blinking fast. I'm not going to hide, I replied. Not anymore. The Branson Foundation Gala was held at the Cleveland Museum of Art. Grand rotunda, marble floors, white pillars. The kind of place where the acoustics make your footsteps sound richer than they really are. We arrived hand in hand. Not because we were pretending, but because I wanted to show that I wasn't there as a ghost in my own marriage. As soon as we walked in, heads turned. There were smiles, yes. But there was also something else. That peculiar uptight discomfort that tends to follow rich people when they're forced to re-acknowledge someone they'd already filed away as irrelevant. Celia's mother, Eleanor, approached with her signature air kiss greeting and thin, polished smile. Marshall, she said, voice smooth but tight. We're so pleased you could join us. I gave her a polite nod. Wouldn't have missed it. She hesitated a moment. We're all very sorry for how things were handled at the wedding. I held her gaze. Which part? She faltered, just slightly. All of it. Truly. Celia stepped in. We've had a lot of conversations since then. Yes, Eleanor said, regaining control. Well, I'm glad we're moving forward. We moved into the main hall, where a string quartet played near the staircase. Servers carried glasses of rose and tiny plates of hors d'oeuvres. Everyone looked expensive and hollow. Then I saw Richard. He was in a dark charcoal suit, leaning near a sculpture and swirling bourbon in his glass. When he saw me, he smiled, small, knowing. You clean up well, he said. Thanks for the nudge, I replied. He tipped his glass toward Celia. She told me you might come. I told her if you did, it better be because you wanted to. I nodded. He leaned in. Just so you know, your name's on the program. Right under ours. Said you were the evening's financial advisor. That caught me off guard. I didn't submit that, I said. Celia did, he replied. Said it was time they saw what you actually do. Halfway through the evening, a woman from the planning committee approached. She had her clipboard and headset. All business. Mr. Wright, just confirming. You'll still be giving the brief finance update tonight, correct? I blinked. Finance update. She checked her notes. You're listed to give the 3-minute donor transparency report after the Branson Foundation's annual figures. Your wife said you'd be comfortable. I turned to Celia. She looked sheepish. I thought, you might like the chance to speak. To be seen for who you are. I hadn't spoken in front of a group that large since a corporate conference in Columbus years ago. But something in me shifted. I said, fine. Let's do it. The moment came. The room dimmed. A spotlight warmed the stage. Eleanor spoke first, of course, gracious thanks, legacy honors, museum partnerships. Then Richard took the mic to introduce me. Before our closing remarks, he said, I'd like to invite someone I've come to respect deeply. Someone who's contributed far more than he's been given credit for. My son-in-law, Marshall Wright. The room buzzed. I walked up, took the mic, and stood in the center of that marble rotunda. My name's Marshall, I began. I've worked in finance and accounting for 18 years. I've advised companies, nonprofits, and individual investors, many right here in Cleveland. What I haven't always done is belong in rooms like this. People shifted, but not because I wasn't qualified, not because I didn't contribute, just because some folks decided that status matters more than substance. Those titles matter more than character. My voice was steady, measured. I'm here tonight, not just as Celia's husband, but as someone who's helped restructure the Branson Foundation's donation transparency, who advised on their most recent audit, and who believes that even in rooms like this, maybe especially in rooms like this, people should be seen for their values, not their last name. The room was silent. I ended with, "Thank you for the opportunity to speak. It means more than you know." When I stepped down, there was actual applause. Some light, some hesitant, but real. Richard smiled. Celia looked like she was holding her breath. Eleanor looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. Perfect. Later, I found Becca near the open bar. She was fidgeting with her bracelet and looking anywhere but at me. "Hey," she said awkwardly. "Hey, I heard your speech. That was classy." I raised a brow. "Didn't think I had it in me?" "No," she admitted. "I didn't." We stood there in silence for a moment. "I was wrong about you," she said. "And I'm not sure I could have handled what happened the way you did." "You wouldn't have had to," I said. "Because they never would have done it to you." She flinched. "That's fair." I walked away. When the night was over, and the coats were collected, and the donors drifted out to their cars, I stood with Celia on the museum steps. The cold air was biting. The marble underfoot gleamed. "You did good," she said. "You shouldn't have volunteered me without asking," I replied. "I know," she said, "but I also knew you'd do it better than anyone else." I watched her for a long moment. "Why now?" I asked. "Why the shift?" She looked up at me. "Because I realized I'd rather lose the approval of 100 people than lose you." I didn't say anything right away. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was the name tag, the original one, not the ripped-up one I found. "Turns out there were two," she said. "This was the one I kept. I wanted to hold on to it as a reminder." "Of what?" "Of who I never want to be again." She handed it to me. I took it, turned it over in my hand, and then calmly, without ceremony, dropped it into the trash can beside the stairs. She smiled. I did too.